What if I told you that the biggest mistake you're making in winter fishing has nothing to do with your bait, your line, or your technique? We all spend hours, sometimes days, freezing our tails off, trying every lure in the box, convinced the fish are just being finicky. But what if the hard truth is they aren't even there? Today, we're talking about a concept that will change the way you approach cold water, angling forever. The very real possibility that the lake you're fishing is empty. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand why some of your favorite summer hotspots are complete ghost towns in January, and you'll know how to avoid wasting your time on a fishless lake. I'm going to reveal why so many anglers fail in the winter, and it's a reason almost nobody talks about. So let me ask you this before we dive in. Do you believe that every lake holds its fish year-round? Let me know your honest answer in the comments right now. We've all been raised on the same winter fishing gospel, right? The story goes like this: when the water gets cold, fish get lazy. They bunch up in the deepest holes, their metabolism slows to a crawl, and they just don't want to eat. The advice is always the same: downsize your lure, slow your presentation to a dead crawl, and be patient. We spend years perfecting these techniques. We buy the sensitive rods, the finesse baits, the high-end electronics to find those deep holes where they're supposedly stacked up like cordwood. And yet, how many times have you followed that advice perfectly, marked what looked like fish, and still spent 8 hours staring at a motionless rod tip? You go home cold, frustrated, and questioning your skills. The problem is we are trying to solve the wrong puzzle. We're so focused on how to catch the fish, we never stop to ask the most fundamental question: are there any fish here to be caught in the first place? Let's start by painting a very familiar picture. It's a cold grey morning. The steam is rising off the water, or maybe you're drilling holes through 10 inches of ice. You're filled with that classic angler's optimism. You head to a spot that was on fire back in June, a main lake point, a sunken weed bed, a rocky shoreline. You spend hours there. You try every single trick in the book. You try the slow drag, the dead stick, the vertical jig. Nothing. Not a bump, not a tick on the line. You tell yourself they're just not biting today. You blame the weather front that moved through 2 days ago. You blame the full moon. You blame everything except the one possibility that your brain refuses to accept: that you are casting a lure into a biological desert. This is the frustrating reality for so many of us, a cycle of hope and disappointment that repeats itself all winter long because we are operating under a false assumption. The fundamental assumption that trips us all up is that a lake is a closed box. We think of it as a giant aquarium. The fish are born there, they live there, and they die there. Sure, they move around within the box, shallow in the spring, deep in the summer, and even deeper in the winter, but they never leave the box. This is true for some bodies of water, like small, landlocked ponds, but for a massive number of the places we love to fish, especially larger reservoirs and natural lakes with connecting rivers, this is a complete and utter myth. The truth is, many of these lakes aren't boxes at all. They're more like bus stations. They are temporary stops along a much larger aquatic highway. And when the seasons change and the conditions become unfavorable, the fish pack their bags and hit the road, leaving that bus station almost completely empty until spring rolls around again. So let's really unpack this idea of fish migration. We easily accept that birds fly south for the winter. We understand that deer and elk move from high country to low country to survive. Why is it so hard for us to believe that fish do the exact same thing? They are driven by the same powerful primal instincts: survival, food, and finding stable living conditions. For many species of fish, staying put in a lake that's about to freeze over and lose its food supply is a death sentence. So they move. They travel, sometimes dozens of miles, through connecting river channels to find a better winter home. This isn't just a slight shift from one end of the lake to the other. This is a full-blown exodus, an evacuation. The bass, walleye, or crappie you were catching on that point in July might be wintering 20 miles downstream in a deep river bend right now. This brings us to the next critical point. You have to learn to see water not as an isolated lake, but as part of a larger system. Think about it. That giant reservoir you fish wasn't always a lake. It was once a river, and a dam was built to flood a valley. That river still flows into it on one end and out of it on the other. For fish, that dam is a major obstacle, but the river channel is their natural highway. They will use that main river channel, which still snakes its way through the bottom of the reservoir, as a travel corridor. A 500-acre lake might seem huge to us, but to a fish, it might just be a wide, slow spot on its 1,000-mile-long river home. Understanding this changes everything. You stop thinking, where are the fish in this lake? And you start asking, where are the fish in this entire river system right now? Let's get specific about the types of water bodies that are most susceptible to becoming these winter ghost towns. The number one culprit is the reservoir, especially a run-of-the-river style reservoir. These are often long and narrow and behave more like a slow-moving river than a traditional lake. The fish in these systems are highly migratory. They might move up into the reservoir's shallower bays to spawn and feed in the spring and summer, but when the cold sets in, their instinct tells them to drop back into the safety and stability of the main river channel. They will often travel miles downstream, below the dam, or to the next reservoir in the chain, seeking out very specific types of wintering habitat that the main lake simply does not offer. Fishing the main body of a place like this in deep winter can be one of the most futile exercises in all of angling. It's not just reservoirs either. Many large natural lakes are also part of a bigger river system. If your favorite lake has a significant river flowing into it and another flowing out of it, you need to be suspicious. Fish will use these rivers as escape routes. Think of the Great Lakes. The walleye and steelhead don't just stay in the big lake all year. In the fall and winter, massive numbers of them run up the tributary rivers. They aren't just doing this to spawn, they are seeking thermal refuge and different food sources. The same principle applies on a smaller scale all over the country. If there is a highway leading out of your lake, you have to assume that a significant portion of its residents are using it when the neighborhood starts to get bad in the winter. Ignoring that outlet river is like ignoring the elephant in the room. Here's a practical exercise. Go pull up a satellite map of your favorite winter fishing spot right now. Don't just look at the lake itself. Zoom out. Follow the creek channels that feed it. More importantly, find where the water leaves the lake. Is there a dam? Is there a river that flows out? How far does that river go before it hits another lake or a much larger river? If you see a clear and obvious connection, you have to start thinking like a fish. If you were a base in that lake, and the water temperature was dropping to 35 degrees and the bait fish were disappearing, and that river offered a path to a deeper, more stable environment downstream, would you stay? Of course not, you'd leave. And you wouldn't be alone. The bulk of the predator fish population would be making that same journey with you. Now, why exactly are they leaving? What makes their summer home so inhospitable in the winter? The first major driver is the search for stable temperatures. While the main lake can have wild temperature swings and be exposed to harsh winds, a deep hole in an outside bend of a river downstream might hold a very stable, slightly warmer water temperature all winter long. This is what biologists call a hibernaculum, a winter refuge. Fish are cold-blooded creatures. Their entire world revolves around water temperature. They will travel remarkable distances to find a place where they can expend the least amount of energy to survive the winter. They are not looking for a place to eat aggressively. They are looking for a place to rest comfortably until spring. That place is very often not in the main lake. The second reason is even more simple. They follow the food. The entire aquatic food chain can shift dramatically in the winter. The schools of shad or shiners that were spread all over the main lake in the summer will also consolidate and migrate. Often, they are drawn to the very same winter refuge areas as the predator fish. They might be seeking that same stable water temperature, or they might be drawn to the slight current of a river channel. Either way, where the bait goes, the bass and walleye will follow. If the entire pantry moves out of the house and relocates to the garage for the winter, you're not going to sit in the kitchen and starve. You're going to go to the garage. The fish are no different. An absence of bait fish on your electronics in the main lake is a giant, screaming red flag. The third and often most critical factor, especially in shallower, fertile lakes, is oxygen. Once a lake freezes over, it's sealed off from the atmosphere, which is its primary source of new oxygen. Now add in a winter's worth of dead, decaying weeds on the bottom. That decomposition process consumes huge amounts of dissolved oxygen. In some areas of a lake, especially shallow bays or areas without current, the oxygen levels can drop so low that they can no longer support fish life. This creates what are called anoxic zones. Fish have no choice but to evacuate these areas or die. They will instinctively seek out areas with better oxygen, which is often found in or near the current of a connecting river channel. They are literally leaving to find water they can breathe. So you have this perfect storm of negative conditions brewing in the main lake. The water temperature is unstable and dropping. The primary food source, the bait fish, has packed up and moved downstream. And in some areas, the oxygen is literally being sucked out of the water. When you look at it this way, it's no longer a mystery why the fish leave. It's a simple, logical act of survival. Staying put would be foolish. The amazing part is how few anglers connect these dots. We sit over a barren piece of water, staring at a blank fish finder, and we tell ourselves the fish are just turned off. The reality is the fish are just fine. They're probably schooled up thick as thieves, 10 miles away, enjoying the stable conditions of their winter home while we freeze for no reason. This isn't just a theory, by the way. This has been proven time and again with scientific tracking studies. Biologists have implanted radio transmitters into fish, like bass, walleye, and catfish, in these reservoir systems. And what they find is astounding. They track a fish all summer long, and it uses a predictable 10 to 20 acre home range in a bay of the main lake. Then, as fall turns to winter, they watch on their tracking equipment as that fish leaves the bay, finds the old river channel, and begins a journey. It might travel for days, covering 20, 30, even 50 miles before settling into a deep hole in the river for the next 3 months. And it's not just one fish, it's the majority of the population making the same trip. The science confirms it. The fish are not in the lake. Okay, so how do you use this knowledge to your advantage and stop wasting your time? It starts before you even hitch up the boat. It starts with map study. I'm not talking about just looking at a depth chart of the lake. I mean, serious big picture map study. Use online satellite maps and topographic maps to identify the entire watershed. Find the major inlets and, most importantly, the outlet. If that outlet is a river of any significant size, your alarm bells should be ringing. Your primary goal is no longer to find spots in the lake. It's to identify the likely migration routes and wintering areas outside of the main lake. You have to completely reframe your approach from a lake fisherman to a river system fisherman. Your next step is to look for the classic wintering holes along those migration routes. Fish are lazy and predictable. They will almost always choose the best available spot. On a river system, this typically means the deepest water in a given stretch. Look for sharp outside bends in the river channel. These areas are created by current, which scours out a deep hole on the outside of the turn. These holes offer depth, a break from the main current, and stable temperatures. This is textbook wintering habitat. Other key areas are the deep holes directly below dams, or at the mouths of major tributary creeks that dump into the river. These are the fish magnets of the entire system from December to February. Don't underestimate the power of local, human intelligence. Go to the local bait and tackle shop, the real one, not the big box store. Talk to the old guy behind the counter who has been fishing this system for 50 years. Don't ask him, where are the bass biting in the lake? And that's the wrong question. Ask him, hey, when it gets really cold, do most of the fish in this system tend to drop back down into the river? Watch his reaction. A knowledgeable local will likely nod and say, oh yeah, nobody who knows what they're doing fishes the main lake after Thanksgiving. This kind of information is pure gold. These guys have decades of on-the-water observation that is more valuable than any fancy map. Another key indicator is boat ramp activity. Drive around the system in the middle of January. Is the main lake boat ramp a ghost town covered in a dusting of snow with no tire tracks? But when you drive 20 miles downstream to a small, sketchy-looking ramp on the river itself, you see a half-dozen trailers from serious local anglers. That's your sign. That is a massive clue that the smart money isn't fishing the big, easy-to-access lake. They are following the fish to their winter refuge. Angler pressure, or the lack of it, can tell you everything you need to know about where the fish are and where they are not. Pay attention to where the other boats are, especially the ones that look like they belong to serious fishermen. You also need to adjust your mindset about what you're looking for. In the summer, we look for spots, a point, a weed line, a dock. In the winter, on these systems, you are not looking for a spot. You are looking for a zone. A wintering area might be a half-mile stretch of a river channel. The fish will be concentrated in massive schools, but they might be in the head of the hole one day and the tail of it the next. The key is to find the general area, that winter sanctuary, and then use your electronics to pinpoint the school. It's a much more focused surgical approach than the run-and-gun style of summer fishing. It's less about covering water and more about dissecting a very specific, high-percentage area. Let's talk about timing. This migration doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process that usually starts in the mid to late fall as the water temperatures begin to drop consistently. There's a transition period where you can intercept these fish along their migration routes. This can be some of the best fishing of the year. But once the water temperature drops into the low 40s and 30s, the vast majority of the fish will have completed their journey and settled into their winter homes. That's when the main lake truly dies. They will stay in these wintering areas until the spring thaw begins to raise water temperatures, triggering their reverse migration back up into the lake to prepare for the spawn. This might sound discouraging. It might feel like I'm telling you that your favorite lake is unfishable for 4 months of the year, but it's the opposite. This is empowering knowledge. It stops you from wasting hundreds of hours and gallons of gas on unproductive water. It forces you to become a smarter, more strategic angler. It encourages you to explore new stretches of water and to understand the annual cycle of the fish on a much deeper level. Instead of guessing, you are making an educated decision based on the biology of the fish and the nature of the system they live in. Knowing where not to fish is just as important as knowing where to fish. So, the next time you're planning a winter fishing trip, I want you to pause. Before you check the weather or organize your tackle, pull up that map. Ask yourself the hard question: is it truly possible that the fish I want to catch aren't even in this lake right now? Have I ever really considered where they go? The simple act of asking this question, of challenging that core assumption that the fish are always somewhere in there, is the first step. It separates the anglers who rely on hope from the anglers who rely on strategy. It's the difference between a long, cold, fishless boat ride and the potential for the best winter fishing day of your life, because you're finally fishing where the fish actually are. So, let's bring it all home. We've spent our entire fishing lives being told that winter fish are deep, slow, and hard to catch, but we never stopped to consider the most radical possibility of all, that they've packed up and left town entirely. The single most important takeaway from this is that many of our favorite lakes are not closed systems. They are just wide spots on a river, and the fish use those river highways to move to better winter neighborhoods. They are driven by temperature, food, and oxygen to evacuate the main lake and consolidate in very specific wintering holes, often miles away. This isn't a failure of your technique or your lure choice. It's a failure to recognize the fundamental nature of the water you're fishing. Understanding this concept is what will save you from countless frustrating, fishless days in the cold. It forces you to think like a biologist, to see the entire watershed as your playing field, not just one lake. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to challenge some old ideas with me. If this video gave you a new perspective, do me a favor and hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. Now for the final question, after hearing all of this, take a hard look at your home waters. Which lake in your area do you now suspect might be a ghost lake in the winter? Let's discuss it in the comments below.